What you're about to discover isn't being talked about in Washington, and that's exactly the problem. This isn't just a stalled oil deal. It's a seismic betrayal. The United States has just been quietly cut off by its friendliest neighbor. In a move no analyst saw coming, Canada pulled the plug on more than 11 million barrels of oil headed straight for American refineries. No warning, no plan B, just silence, then a shockwave. Gas prices spiked. Food prices followed. And the economy? It wobbled. But here's the twist. Canada didn't just walk away. It walked straight into the arms of China and India. We're talking multi-billion-dollar oil deals. No tariffs, no red tape. Just long-term contracts with global energy giants that completely cut the U.S. out of the picture. So what happened? Why did Canada pivot? And how did Washington miss the signs? It starts with a pipeline. The Trans Mountain Expansion project, now complete, allows Canada to ship up to 890,000 barrels of oil per day, not south but west, directly to global markets. Canada now has access to the Pacific and to Asia. This wasn't just about oil. This was about leverage. For decades, the U.S. believed Canada would always be the reliable neighbor. Quiet, compliant, shipping oil south with no complaints. That illusion? Gone. Canada is now locked into 15-year supply deals with both Beijing and New Delhi. Better prices, fewer rules, no interference from Washington. While Canada looked forward, the U.S. looked backward. During Trump's administration, old trade wars flared back up. Steel, dairy, auto parts. Everything became a battleground. And instead of asking why Canada was pulling away, Washington doubled down on punishment. Meanwhile, Canada moved in silence. Deals were signed with China's state-owned CNPC and India's largest energy conglomerates. No American middlemen, no delays. U.S. refineries slowed. Truckers drove longer routes. Supermarkets raised prices. And still, Washington was caught off guard. Then came the warning. Goldman Sachs quietly projected a 0.8% drop in U.S. GDP if the oil disruption continued, enough to push the economy into a mild recession by mid-2025. But this isn't just economics. This is influence. Canada's shift is geopolitical. More than 20% of oil trades in 2023 happened outside the U.S. dollar. Gold, yuan, direct currency swaps, and Canada is leaning in. Prime Minister Mark Carney has already hinted at deeper ties with non-Western economies and less dependence on the U.S. This isn't just about barrels. It's about breaking away. Then came Trump's boldest move yet, a proposed 150% import tariff on any BRICS nation that even considered ditching the dollar. It wasn't diplomacy, it was desperation. Markets trembled, energy stocks fell, and for the first time in years, the dollar looked vulnerable. Behind the scenes, central banks scrambled. Leaders held quiet emergency calls. Global partners began preparing for a new reality. Because Canada's message was clear, we no longer need American permission. We no longer need American protection. We've built our own path. This wasn't just an oil reroute. This was a declaration. Canada is done playing backup. And the US? It might have just lost more than oil. It may have lost control of the global energy game. Behind closed doors, allies began to whisper. Had Washington lost the plot? What once seemed like a simple acronym, BRICS, had transformed into a rising global force. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were no longer just emerging economies. They were building a system to bypass US dominance. Gold-backed currencies, blockchain-linked banking, trade agreements without the dollar. So when Canada sent over $100 billion in oil to China, it wasn't just trade. It was a symbol, a warning. The West no longer had a monopoly on energy diplomacy. Trump's reaction wasn't calm. It was desperate. His team released a statement accusing BRICS of sabotaging global stability. But investors weren't fooled. They knew where the chaos was really coming from. Washington. In a fragile global economy, threats aren't strategy, they're explosives. Trump wasn't defending the dollar, he was defending himself. When oil outrage didn't land, he reached for something else. Milk. In a fiery rally in Pennsylvania, Trump claimed Canada was slamming the U.S. with 270% tariffs on milk, butter, and yogurt. The crowd gasped. American farmers cheered, but economists, they raised their eyebrows. Yes, those tariffs exist, but only if import quotas are exceeded. And for the last 3 years, the U.S. hasn't come close to those limits. In fact, over $1 billion in U.S. dairy exports enters Canada tariff-free every year. So why the outrage? Because the truth didn't matter. The narrative did. Trump needed a villain. Milk became a weapon. Social media exploded. Videos of spilled milk, angry ranchers, even crying cows. Fox News labeled Canadian dairy policy as economic terrorism. Through it all, Trump smiled, nodded, and kept talking. The manipulation? Brilliant. The outrage? Effective. The truth? Buried. Then, Canada responded, not with words, with action. A $43 million rebate freeze on Tesla vehicles. Gone. Canadian officials accused Tesla of gaming the system, dumping cars into dealerships just as the subsidy budget was about to run dry. Over 8,000 vehicles sold in a single weekend. Tesla denied wrongdoing, but the timing, too perfect. Just days earlier, Trump had slapped a 25% tariff on Canadian cars. Now, Canada was striking back, not just on oil, but on electric vehicles. Elon Musk, often seen as Trump's quiet ally, was suddenly caught in the middle. Canada's Minister of Transport said it clearly. Taxpayer dollars wouldn't support companies manipulating incentives. The real message? Louder than the policy. This was political retaliation. Tesla's stock dipped. Dealerships panicked. Customers were left in limbo. And Musk? He said nothing. But this wasn't just about Tesla. It was about trust, tariffs, and the collapse of trade confidence. Canada's move sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. If Canada was willing to challenge Tesla, who was next? Officials in Ottawa started reviewing incentives for other U.S. tech firms. Private meetings were held with Canadian startups. New legislation was pushed, designed to favor homegrown innovation. The message was clear. If your business depends on Washington's politics, you may not have a future here. Then, Trump doubled down. Trade war theater. New stage, new enemy, new drama. But behind the scenes, real people were paying the price. Gas hit $5.25 a gallon. Food prices surged. Even eggs felt like luxuries. It wasn't just the tariffs, it was the chaos. One day, aluminum tariffs were lifted. The next, reimposed. Auto parts crossing the border now required 6 times the paperwork. Factories slowed, businesses stalled, families canceled vacations. The economy? Stuck in quicksand. And Trump? He said it was all going exactly as planned. He even proposed expanding tariffs to Europe. Why? Because they were talking to BRICS. Because they didn't agree with him. While he raged, American factories stood still. Raw materials vanished. Startups missed deadlines. Auto workers braced for layoffs. For every speech about winning, another company filed for bankruptcy. Economists called it death by 1,000 disruptions. Meanwhile, Canada moved forward. New energy deals, booming ports, a growing economy. No trade war, just trade growth. And the U.S.? Watching from the outside. But the real damage wasn't the economy, it was the loss of credibility. And in global markets, credibility is everything. More than 20% of global oil trades are now being completed without using the U.S. dollar. This is no longer a theory, it's a functioning system. Canada, China, and India have not only embraced this shift, they're building on it. For Washington, the implications are massive. The dollar's strength has always relied on being indispensable in energy markets. But now, global players are proving the opposite. Energy commerce doesn't need the dollar anymore. And worse, for the US, it's thriving without it. While America plays defense, the rest of the world is executing bold strategies. Former allies are hedging their bets, joining new financial systems, and leaving Washington out of the room. BRI leaders now hold summits without inviting the US. Foreign ministers from Brazil and South Africa openly call for a multipolar world. And Canada? Canada is no longer whispering about independence, it's shouting it across oceans. But the clearest sign isn't in speeches or headlines, it's in the contracts. Long-term billion-dollar energy deals are now being written in yuan, rupees, and euros. And the silence from Washington? That is what irrelevance sounds like. Still, the worst was yet to come, the energy winter. The abrupt halt of Canadian energy exports triggered chaos across the US. Hydropower from the north disappeared. Northeastern states issued blackout warnings. New York, Vermont, even Pennsylvania braced for rolling outages. By the time winter hit, it was too late. California's energy prices surged more than 40%. In Michigan, steel mills ran at half capacity. Fuel refineries dropped from 90 to 71% efficiency. The result? nationwide fuel shortages. Public services struggled, schools cut hours to save on heating. Rural hospitals fought to keep emergency generators online. Airline ticket prices soared as jet fuel costs tripled. Families had to choose groceries or gasoline. Governors declared emergencies. Industry leaders begged for federal help, but nothing worked. The U.S. wasn't ready to replace what Canada once supplied. Alternative sources were too slow, too expensive, or too far away. When Washington finally reached out, Canada had already moved on. The emotional toll matched the financial pain. People felt abandoned. Television anchors explained how the U.S. had lost its leverage. Radio hosts warned of a permanent shift. Social media showed viral clips of Europe celebrating Canadian oil shipments. It was a winter of humiliation. And still, it wasn't over. Canada's transformation didn't happen overnight, but when it came, it was unstoppable. Once the quiet neighbor, Canada had become a confident geopolitical force. Prime Minister Mark Carney made it clear, Canada must chart its own path for our future and our sovereignty. Parliament cheered. Then came the policies, taxes on U.S. tech firms, agricultural import caps, Tesla removed from national EV subsidies. Washington was furious. Trump called it betrayal. But Canada wasn't betraying liberty. It was ending dependency. With new allies, new policies, and newfound power, Canada no longer asked permission. It simply moved forward. Wall Street noticed. At first, it was whispers, then panic. The New York Stock Exchange plunged over 1,000 points in a single day. The Nasdaq dropped more than 3%, its worst showing since the financial crisis. But the real story wasn't the numbers. It was the fear. Foreign capital fled U.S. markets at levels not seen since 2008. Why? Because this wasn't just volatility, it was systemic. Canada's decision to redirect $14 billion in oil to China had sparked a supply crisis the U.S. couldn't handle. Wall Street's response? Pull back, cut exposure, brace for impact. CEOs flooded the White House switchboard. They demanded answers. Instead, they got late-night tweets praising Elon Musk. No roadmap, no strategy, just noise. In private meetings, hedge funds and pension directors asked the same question, is this what losing global confidence feels like? The answer came, loud and clear. Factories halted, prices didn't. If Wall Street had a heart attack, Main Street had a slow bleed. Factories didn't just slow down, they shut down. Auto plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky went dark. Steel, lithium, and aluminum costs surged over 30%. Ford delayed its electric F-150 indefinitely. GM announced restructuring, code for layoffs. Tesla, still reeling from Canada's subsidy freeze, slashed production targets. But prices? They kept rising. A $29,000 car now cost $38,000. Replacement parts were scarce. Dealerships were ghost towns. Consumers were stuck. Electric vehicles were now unaffordable and unavailable. Government relief never came. A proposed fuel credit died in committee. The Department of Energy admitted reserves weren't enough. And just when prices seemed to stabilize, they climbed higher. Gas, groceries, heating, all marching upward. Inflation wasn't a statistic. It was a daily reality. And that's why we want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts below. Let's start the conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe. More truth, less noise. See you in the next one.